to the entertainment Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, and there's a lot of news coming out. I want to get my 7th-round mock draft up today, and I will, but expect another video on top of this to be out as I'm reading some things on Twitter that are very interesting. But in this video, I wanted to break down the press conference that came out from Dave Gettleman today regarding the state of the New York Giants, both, with some of their free agency moves and how it set them up for the draft, and hinting at what they may or may not be looking at in terms of the draft this year. Now, you got to recognize that it is Dave Gettleman's job not to let us know what he's going to do in the draft. It would be bad for the New York Giants. You don't want teams to know what we're leaning, even if it's obvious that we may take Isaiah Simmons or a tackle. You don't want them to think you're committed. You don't want to lose any potential trade leverage, and we'll get into that later. But, Gettleman's not going to lead on. That's not his job, even though in the past he has. He definitely led on with Saquon Barkley, and this year he hasn't really led on. He hasn't said that there's any gold jacket prospects or anything like that. You haven't really heard Isaiah Simmons' name come out of his mouth that much. And, a little bit you may have, and he's certainly a very impressive prospect. And they've talked a bit about the tackle, but they haven't talked about that much about any one individual. We've heard from secondary sources like Ralph Acciano, but you haven't heard any real individual names coming out of the mouth of Dave Gettleman, and that is the way that we should want it. It should be a mystery leading up into the pick, even though we would like to know answers as soon as possible. But I wanted to jump into some of the things that Gettleman said and my opinion on some of the things that he had to say. So let's jump into some of the quotes that came out today as Dan Salamone, who covers the New York Giants, did a great job posting all these tweets on Giants.com. First thing that he had to say was Dave Gettleman was asked about Leonard Williams' franchise tag. He said they felt good about their cap space and what Williams brought to the table. It was prudent. I think we could argue all day. We could go back and forth that Leonard Williams was probably not the best, signing in terms of, money and usage of the cap. But the Giants do have a good cap situation going forward. I've said that time and time again. I think Leonard Williams is a good player, and we've got to move on. We could say all day that it was a horrible trade, but at the end of the day, he's on the football team. I think most of us expected him to be on the football team after the Giants surrendered their 3rd and 5th round pick, and hopefully he helps this defense this year. Next thing we're going to talk about, Dave Gettleman on bringing in players who had ties to the organization. There's a little bit of a lean towards people in free agency. And I agree with that. There's always a little bit of a lean, but they went above and beyond. They definitely brought in, every player, we say it all the time, have played with some coach on this roster, a lot of whom played with Joe Judge. And I think that speaks volume to the coaching staff. I think it speaks volume to Joe Judge that a guy like Nate Ebner went out of his way to come and play for his former head coach. And I think the Giants definitely focused on that, and I think it'll be interesting. And I was a little bit disappointed that a reporter didn't ask him if they would have the same philosophy in the draft, because I do tend to think that will be something to look for that'll be interesting in this year's draft. Former players that were coached by some of the coaches on this roster. But that was not asked. Next thing we're going to bring up is, where do the Giants stand at offensive tackle? Gettleman mentioned the Cam Fleming signing and said they have faith in Nick Gates. Gettleman also said Nate Solder had a tough year and he knows it. Gettleman also points out the points to the offensive tackle depth in the roster. Now, some people may read that, and you can read this one of two ways. Isaiah Simmons people are going to read it, he's talking about depth. That means he's not looking for a starter. That means that he's leaning Isaiah Simmons. And the offensive tackle people will say, well, what is he supposed to say? He's not going to badmouth an offensive tackle that he just signed with Cam Fleming, and he's trying to get behind his player with Nick Gates, who had a strong last 3 or 4 games last year, and he did recognize that Nate Solder had a bad year. The only thing that I take from this is that the New York Giants are definitely going to take an offensive tackle at some point in this draft, and it's left up for interpretation as to where they might go about doing it. But he's not going to say after he just signed a guy that they're definitely going to take a tackle, right, in the first round. Don't read too much into it, but tackle is definitely on the agenda, as it should be. Next thing we're going to read. Dave Gettleman thinks that defensive coordinator Patrick Graham's scheme is going to fit Blake Martinez. He's going to get everyone lined up. And obviously, to me, that kind of hints at obviously a big question mark with Blake Martinez, who we invested $10 million a year in, was pass coverage. Well, Patrick Graham, 2 years ago, Blake Martinez actually graded very strongly in that department. Graham left. The Giants brought Martinez in, and I think the thinking was from Gettleman, from Graham, from Judge, is that they could get that 2018 version of Blake Martinez back. And if they feel that way, that may or may not. point to that they may not be looking to take a linebacker in the first round if they think they could get that 2018 Martinez back. And, it's not even up for opinion right now. I'm trying to break down what I think is going to happen. And in that quote, Gettleman is kind of saying that we think we're going to get the 2018 Blake back. We think he fits this scheme very well. And we think Patrick Graham is going to get the most out of him. Next thing we're going to pull up, are the Giants in the position? This, to me, is one of the more interesting questions. Are the Giants in a position to take the best available player in the draft based on free agency? Dave Gettleman said, I think we've done a good job. It's not perfect. I'm pleased with where we're at going into the draft. So he's basically saying, in the past, he has come out and said we're taking the best available player. He said that with Saquon Barkley. He's not saying that here. He was asked, did free agency set you up to take the best available player? He says, I think we've done a good job. It's not perfect. Well, perfect to me, in response to that question, would have been absolutely. We're perfectly set up. We're going to take the best available player on our draft board. He's not saying that here. So to me, that's kind of telling you we may very well draft for need. Now, this is just speculation. This is just how I'm reading the quotes, but that's how I took it. Next thing we're going to pull up is, and actually that was the last one. That was an old tweet from Jordan Reed. So I wanted to get all those quotes out to you guys and kind of break them down and kind of go over, how I took it. I'm not going to read too much into the offensive tackle quote. I don't think there's much there. The people read the word depth and they think, okay, well, that means they're going to be looking in the later rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. That's not necessarily the way that you should be taking that. That may be the case. It may not be. We will not know until draft night. Like I said, he's not going to badmouth Fleming. He's not going to badmouth Gates. And he's going to try his best not to badmouth Nate Solder, even though he did say in that quote that Nate Solder did not play well last year. I did post a tweet today, and I listed all the great pass rushers, and take a look at it if you follow me on Twitter, and tell me if you'd feel confident with those guys being our starting offensive tackles going into next season. My guess would be that Dave Gettleman would not, which is why I still remain consistent that I think they will go with a tackle, if not in the first, definitely in the second of this year's draft. And center is definitely an area of need as well. He did later go on to say throughout that interview that they may be looking to draft a center at some point in the draft as well. They said Gates will get some reps in training camp, but I do think they will look to address the center as well at some point in this draft. I'm leaning offensive line at this point in time, and the most telling quote in that out of all those quotes to me was when asked if they were set up perfectly to to pick for the best available player with that first round pick. He did not definitively say that in that statement. So take it for what you will. I wanted to analyze some of the quotes, break it down for you guys, and give you guys my thoughts. And like I said, there'll be a few more videos up today as there's a lot of news. Hope you guys keep coming back. Hope you enjoy the content, and go New York Giants. As always, if you liked what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.